Good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you very much to Siddharth and the Blue Circle for inviting PwC to be part of this session. Um I think we are going through a very interesting journey in our adoption of electric vehicles in the country. And the way we would like to run this panel is each one of the panelists will share their opinion on how they see the market evolving, what are some of the key factors, challenges, and after that we will have some certain questions that I'll pose to the panel, and then we'll open the floor for Q&A. Mr. Srivastava is, I believe, on the way. So hopefully he will be joining us soon in the next 10 or minutes. So let me first begin with my own view, or rather PwC's view of how we see the market evolving, specifically in the area of electric two-wheelers. First and foremost, I think there is one area of unanimity in our country that we have two big problems in our economic development agenda. First and foremost is we need cities to be vibrant, and we need these cities to be livable. And with that, I think clearly pollution is a huge issue that all of us face. Of course, in Delhi and NCR, it's very pronounced, and we've had our judiciary being quite active on that agenda. But it's not just a Delhi NCR thing. Around the country, India is one of the most polluted cities. And vehicular emission is definitely one of the contributors, although not the only contributor. So I think there is alignment that we have a huge problem as a society that needs to be addressed. Now, there is also broad consensus that battery electric vehicle is an alternate option that is feasible. And not just in India, but around the world, we see a lot of the governments, backing battery electric vehicles as a potent technology that can replace, at least partially, the internal combustion engine in the immediate future. So I think those two things are pretty much clear. But the pathway to really create this market and make it work in the context of our country, given the constraints, is the real challenge. Of course, there was a lot of talk about the regulatory push towards adoption of electric vehicle, and we went through a cycle of, more aggressive regulatory push. And now, of course, the stand is that, various technologies will coexist. So I'll park that issue on the side because I think at least for now, it seems that there is a certain direction in which we are going as a country. So let's talk about, what can we do as an industry to really drive adoption of electric vehicles in the two-wheeler segment. So first and foremost, I would say, why is it that the customer is not really adopting electric two-wheelers? I think the simple answer is, one, there's a delta in the initial price, because batteries are more expensive, and therefore you need to pay higher to own an electric vehicle. And why, as a customer, would I do that? Is it going to be just because I'm environmentally conscious? I don't think around the world this has happened. It will not happen in the Indian context. So what is the reason someone would go for electric vehicle? I think the key point, and that's where we are seeing some traction in the market, is where it makes economic rational for me as a customer to go for a battery electric vehicle. By all means, I will go for it. And one of the things going well for battery electric vehicles is that the cost of operation is much lower than that in an internal combustion engine. So what we are finding is those segments of the customers where the usage level is upwards of almost 100 kilometers, there it is a slam dunk case that you have to and should go for battery electric vehicle. So that's the economic rationale. Then there is the other dimension of customer anxiety about new technologies. And when we see, and Mr. Pavan talked about it, whenever there is new technology adoption being talked about, there are different range of concerns that the customer will have. And one of the big challenges with the electric vehicle is lack of familiarity on how the product will behave amongst the general public. For example, what happens if my battery runs out of charge and I'm stranded on the road? What happens with the resale value of my vehicle? Because I don't really know how the battery will perform 3 years hence. What if the battery conks off and that's 40% of the value of the vehicle? And what will be the resale price then? What happens if I want to get finance on my vehicle? How much finance can I get? What interest rate will I have? And where am I really going to charge my vehicle? So these are some of the key questions that are there in the minds of the customer. And while there are certain things, I think clearly some green shoots that are emerging. Very clearly in the fleet segment, we are seeing good adoption of electric vehicles. Even in the neighborhood that I live in Mumbai, the final mile delivery is now being done through an electric two-wheeler, although it looks more like an e-bike. But yeah, the form of the vehicle itself will change with this adoption of technology. So I think those were some of my initial comments. So we have a very august panel today, and very different perspectives. So I want to try and bring out a very on the ground situation on how demand adoption will happen. And I want to first begin with Naveen. I think you have been in this space for I think almost a decade now. Yeah, and one can say you have experienced it all. So, how do you see this journey so far, and do you really think we are at an inflection point where at least certain customer segments are really going to go for electric vehicles in two wheelers in particular? And if so, which segments and how do you see the story emerge?
Uh, is this working? Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mukhtyar. It's an absolute pleasure to be here amongst this panel today. So I just want to put a couple of things in perspective. We've actually been in this for a long time, and earlier when we started our journey, it was a matter of if. It's no longer a matter of if; it's a matter of when now. It's already happening. Also, when we look at electric vehicles, you can't look at it all in one frame of mind. So two-wheelers have a different requirement, three-wheelers have a different requirement, cars have a different requirement, and public transport and larger vehicles have a completely different requirement and different nuances. All of them will work in different segments at different points of time, but the low-hanging fruit, as per various reports which have been done, and we look at India as well, is the two-wheeler and the three-wheeler segment. So that's the one that I'm going to focus more on. I'm going to focus more on two-wheelers, and I guess Ayush is going to focus more on the three-wheeler part of it. Now, three-wheelers is already well established in India, and it's increasing very rapidly. Two-wheelers is beginning to get established now. It's very small as compared to the IC engine, but nevertheless, it's getting there. So what's happening is, why are the consumers not buying it, first and foremost? See, if you look at a couple of years back, we got into this about 12 years back. Actually, it's 18 years back and then 12 years back. The vehicle itself, that point of time, wasn't very robust. The plastics, the whole vehicle wasn't a great product. Now we've come a long way. Now it's automotive grade. So it's as good as the IC engine scooter in terms of the build and the build quality of it. The second is the battery technology, the fuel that comes with the vehicle. So as Mr. Joshi was talking about the fuel that came with the vehicles at that point of time, way back in 1900s, it was the same story. So we started off with vehicles running on lead acid batteries. Now, lead acid batteries is an older technology. It's been there for generations, but it's big and it's heavy, and it doesn't last very long. So it's got a certain number of charges, after which you've got to change the battery. Generally, it's about 300 to 400 cycles for a two-wheeler because of the kind of pressure or the kind of load that is thrust upon it. Since then, we've switched to lithium. So we actually introduced lithium about 8, 9 years back. But in the last 10 years, the price of lithium batteries has come down by 85%. It's still going to drop. It's still over $200 a kilowatt hour, as against about $120, $110 for a lead acid battery. It's still going to drop. So the estimation, there's a Bloomberg estimate, which says by 2024, there's going to be a cross curve which happens between the performance and the price of the battery as against IC, and it's going to be at par. So right now, if you look at a IC versus electric, if it's the same performance, electric will be about twice the price. And if it's the same price, it will be at a much lower performance. Now, there exists a very large segment of people who are buying a IC engine scooter or a motorcycle simply because there is no option. So if you look at from a bicycle, you go straight onto a motorcycle or a scooter. That moped category, what we used to have earlier, is now virtually almost finished. So you're buying either a few thousand rupee bicycle or you're buying a 70,000 rupee motorcycle or a scooter. What happens in between? And India is possibly one of the few markets where the electric vehicles are almost at par. The difference is only about 10 to 20% between the IC and the electric. So there exists a very large population of people who are willing to buy and get an electric vehicle now. The batteries have become portable. So the battery, you can take it up if you're living in Mumbai in an apartment. You can easily take it up and charge it there. They give you a range of anything from 70 onwards to about 120 kilometers, which is far more than what an average Indian uses. India, the average user is only about 20 kilometers, 30 kilometers a day. And the speeds are below 20 kilometers in any case in most of our cities. So average user, so electric serves that purpose also. The problems that we have right now, one is that of awareness. People are still not aware. Beyond the cities, people are still not aware of electric vehicles and how will I charge, how will I use it, and the service network that comes along with it. The second is that of financing. If you look at IC, about 70% of the vehicles are financed, but if you look at electric, only about 3% of vehicles are financed at this point of time, and that too at a regional level, at a local level. So there's no real, even though the government's talking about it, there's no real national financing that's happening. The next is range anxiety. People feel that if I've charged my vehicle, there's no petrol station. What am I going to do? What if I'm stranded somewhere? Now that is more of an anxiety problem than a practical problem. And I'll talk, I guess, later about how to eliminate that part of the problem. But broadly, these are some of the issues where the problems exist right now, or the consumer sees it as a problem. And the last but not the least is actually the resale value, because the vehicles are so new that the resale value has not really been determined at this point, neither by the consumer nor by the financiers. So the financiers don't fund it, thinking that, what happens to the resale value? And the consumer thinks that, what happens to if I want to change the vehicle 5 years or 6 years hence. So these are some of the problems. We'll talk, I guess, over the session, I'll talk more about how we get around these problems and how we as a company are getting around these problems.
Thank you, Naveen. So moving to you, Ayush, of course, I think the three-wheeler segment is in a way almost like a success story, although it's still based on lead acid and the shift is happening towards lithium ion. But what are some of the takeaways since this session is on two-wheelers? So I would like your perspective on what are some of the takeaways on what really happened in the market with three-wheelers that we can bring to the two-wheeler environment, and can it even be replicated, the same approach, And of course, there is a much bigger passenger segment in two-wheelers, so it's a different animal in that sense. But your views on this, please.
So there's a hell lot of a difference between when it comes to a two-wheeler and three-wheeler. Three-wheeler is completely successful because of the commercial usage, what we see from the perspective where the driver is there and there's a missing patch where you have to connect consumers or the passengers where you need to transport them from the bus stop to their houses to the last mile connectivity. So it serves the purpose. It gives a solution to a problem which existed pretty long time. So it helped and sensitized the complete situation on ground where the people didn't need subsidies. There was a driver who was looking for a basic earnings, and then there was the passengers who were wanted to commute from one end to another for the last mile connectivity. So it solved the purpose. From the other end, when we see a two-wheeler, even in India today, people like to compare it with the IC engine, very well seen. And they are not using electric two-wheelers as a primary source of transportation. They are only using them as a secondary source of transportation because they feel, definitely we have talked about challenges, you have talked about challenges, Naveen has talked about challenges, like what a consumer face before buying a vehicle. They have range anxiety, they have their financial problems, they have their, the resale value of the vehicles. So these kind of problems are not addressed because they are looking from the perspective of a consumer where the vehicle need to be self-driven. And instead of the transportation where the people, in a three-wheeler where the driver takes multiple options to earn their living. And even, the major challenge what we have faced from last 10 years is there have been a lot of night buy flyers where the consumers were buying the product because of the cost effectiveness or the cheaper products which are available by them, and they're not getting the service, they're not getting the components or the spare parts. So these kind of, small businessmen or night buy flyers, they have spoiled the industry in early days between 2012 to 2014, 15. We have seen a lot of big companies also coming in, and then they vanished all of a sudden. So it affected and give it a negative image for electric vehicles in India as compared to ICE engines, where we see stable companies, big companies who are there in India for last more than 30 years, 20 years, and they have been servicing, supplying the components. The durability of product has been very good, which has given long-term usage of a same product. We have seen two-wheelers where consumers and the passengers are using them for more than 10 years. The life cycle of the product we are talking about, which was completely missing in initial days of electric two-wheelers because of multiple factors. Maybe lead acid was one of the reason. The spare parts availability was the reason. The spare usage of the product, how to utilize electric two-wheelers was a challenge. But now we are entering to a phase where we see these are the challenges have been phased out. In a modern business perspective, we have more stable, back-end supply chain. Electric vehicles are being involved with lithium-ion batteries again, which will helping up, giving us a long-term solution for, where we see a lead-acid battery pack getting, out of usage within 1.5 to 2 years. And on the other side, we are talking about lithium-ion, which can give you a life cycle of more than 5 years and so. So these kind of solutions are coming up in the industry, and we are definitely seeing that two-wheelers will make space down the line, and people are getting more aware. Government is taking a lot of initiatives as far as the FAME 2 subsidy is concerned, making sure that we have a better supply chain, make in India product available, where you can actually see that we are, more present in the end-to-end solution from where the key components of the electric vehicle are being manufactured in India, till we are getting a solution where, you can have a services where you can, pick any vehicle at any metro station and drop it anywhere else. So these kind of end-to-end solutions is definitely going to evolve the industry, specifically in two-wheeler space, and will move forward from there.
Okay, thanks. So I think winning the trust of the customers, giving a reliable product, and creating more awareness. I think those were some of the key points Ayush you made. Moving to you, Mr. Bansal, share with us your perspective and what has been your experience trying to find a solution through these challenges. I think all three of us have already spoken about the challenges. So maybe if you can explore a little bit further on what is the way forward.
First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me for this session. And a little about myself, Vinit Bansal with EV Motors. We are focused on charging infra and battery technology. So would like to talk from that perspective. Our conversation here is for two-wheelers. So I would like to focus on three things from my perspective, which is going to drive mass adoption of electric vehicles. A couple of panelists have mentioned that India is a country which is driven by commercial viability. So for any technology to be adopted, commercial viability has to be there. And one of the panelists has mentioned that 100 kilometers, if you drive 100 kilometers, it's a no-brainer for commercial viability. And Mr. Munjal also mentioned for individual customers, typically the daily commute is about 20 kilometers. So in my view, initially the adoption will be more in the commercial area where you get the usage of about 100 kilometers or more. So that's where the early adopters are going to be, is the commercial, commercial application. And after a couple of years or so, we'll find that there's an offtake in the individual consumption when the battery cost starts coming down. So that's one of the things is in terms of the usage. So the commercial area is where I see early adoption. The second thing, which is also very important, is I think we discussed that the upfront cost is very high. So financial reengineering is very important for e-mobility to take off. So banks and financial institutions have a big role to play. Without their support, I think it's going to be very difficult to kind of cover the upfront cost. So that's the second area where financial reengineering is required to promote electric vehicles. And the third is infrastructure. For infrastructure, right now, I think the biggest thing is both in terms of charging, in terms of battery manufacturing, component manufacturing. So these are the three things. When I mean infrastructure, it's not only the charging. So that's another area where it requires consideration. Today, access to land, access to load connectivity is a big challenge. We are setting up charging infra. So those are some of the things that we are experiencing right now. So in our view, these are the three very important elements to get to mass production or mass adoption of electric vehicles. I like to also mention two other points, which is very important, is innovation. We are a startup company, so innovation is very important. For, today it takes almost 1.5 to 2 hours to charge any battery that is used in electric vehicles. So there is a lot of work that needs to be done in order to bring the cost or the charging time to 10 to 15 or 20 minutes. So there is technology available, but a lot of innovation is required to make that happen. Yes, today in India for two-wheelers, battery swapping is being very widely used. My personal view is, talking about certain technology, that when we talk about battery swapping, today majority of the cost, 40% of the cost, as was mentioned, is battery. So there is a huge inventory cost that the system is going to build up.
Welcome to Mr. Srivastava. Thank you, sir, for joining us. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah. So I was saying that innovation is also, much required in the country to look at new technologies. And lastly, the standards in the government policies should be such that as the new technologies evolve, the standards should be such that these technologies can be adopted and implemented, in the market. So I think that is also going to be very important for innovation to happen.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Bansal. I think what I found most interesting is, the point you made about financial re-engineering on, addressing the upfront cost piece. And I think that's really where the key to this puzzle lies. And I don't think anybody has so far found a optimum solution for it. But in our own global study at PwC, we've seen, concepts of business model innovation can potentially address it. So it need not only be a financial re-engineering, but it can also be business model innovation. And that's where it links back to shared mobility, in my opinion. And in many ways, shared and electric, if they are handled hand in hand, and if solution is oriented along these, then the viability can be brought in, because volumes can grow, and as volumes grow, price comes down, and the next set of customers start the adoption. So yeah.
I just want to mention one thing on that. So I mean, we are in the charging and battery solution provider. So one of the business model that we are looking and evaluating right now is looking at energy as a service. So whereby you finance the battery and the chargers for the various vehicle manufacturers, specifically two-wheelers and three-wheelers, because that's an area where one can be adopted. So we are looking into that right now and trying to implement that.
Right, sure. So with that, I'll go to Akash. I think Mobycy already has a shared mobility or shared bicycle program, and now you've already launched electric two-wheelers as well. So I'd like your perspective on how do you see these two things going together, and do you see greater adoption with this approach to market development?
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. I'm Akash Gupta. I would just quickly introduce what I do. So we are running a venture called Mobycy, which is into electric shared, scooters solving a lot of commute problems. Now coming to the question, so we are in a very, interesting zone in India. right? We are a country of 1.3 billion people. There are 300 million trips happening every day. If you go into the stats deeper, about 50% of these trips are less than 5 kilometer trips, right? And there are working professionals who are suffering from, going to office from metro or taking a bus and then, shuttling down, picking cabs or autos, which are not the best solution for covering this. Similarly, we have a pollution challenge bouncing on us. We are one of the, world's most polluted cities. We're living in them. We have traffic, which is crazy. I mean, we would all have experience today outside Leela, right? It was a chaos, and that's an everyday thing which is happening. And interestingly, what has happened over the last 4 or 5 years is that people have started adopting what suits best for them at the moment that they want to use it for. So, like, if you are at an airport, you'd be happy, having a cup of coffee in a lounge, or if you're at a railway station, you'll be very happy to have a tea from the, a nearby shop. So that's the audience that we are talking about in India, right? So people are moving from, concepts of ownership to the concepts of usage, right? So what we've learned and what we've tried to do is to solve all of these puzzles together. How to solve pollution, how to solve traffic, how to solve this problem of less than 5 kilometer commute. And all of that, when 2 to 3 years back, when I was looking at solving these problems, my idea was that, we need to just, look at a solution that India can adopt. So we did cycles, we did fuel scooters, we did electric, scooters. And then last 1 year, we've just established that India, all of these problems can possibly be solved using electric two-wheelers, because that becomes the, as we rightly were discussing, as the most easy adoption curve and solves the biggest of the problem, right, when it comes to, solution. So that's what we've been doing. We are deploying, we've got a nice app where people can, and there are a bunch of, such products which are out in the market where people can look at scooters on the app, scan them, unlock them, go to their destinations, park them. They can keep the scooters for a full day if they want to, for the city commute. They can use it for deliveries, which is also, something that's happening quite a lot. They can use these scooters for a campus movement. So within a university, it was a pain walking, right? So we solved that by, giving smaller scooters for the university use case. So yeah, a bunch of these things are coming out. And yes, it's interesting to discuss a lot of the challenges and a lot of things which are evolving in that space to see. And we have, the think tanks here to discuss those. So, yeah.
Okay, thanks, Akash. So moving to you, sir. So just to give you a quick background, we talked about demand evolution, and now that there is broad clarity in terms of the regulatory environment, how do we make the market based on the current situation? So would like your opinion, of course, from Niti Aayog standpoint, and more importantly, I think you interact a lot with various industry participants, and you see a lot of innovation happening as well. So your views on how do you see the demand evolving? So would love to hear you, sir.
Good morning to all of you, and it was really terrible. The distance which I covered in 30 to 40 minutes, I covered it more than 90 minutes. So, and we are talking about the transformative mobility. Well, how to take forward the demand is something which probably you would like to hear. But let me also say a few things. Till about 3 to 4 months back, I used to say that government has done a lot of policy pronouncements, a lot of decisions, fame, and everything was coming out around the March and a few months before that and after that. But now, after interacting with the industry, with the different stakeholders for the previous 3 to 4 months, I do realize that the race has really begun, and there are a lot of players in their gears and in their all set to take, and that let's see who takes the lead. And I'm very happy to see my young friends on the dais with me in this panel, and with whom I have been interacting off and on. sometimes personally and sometimes on the telephonic calls and all. So now the issue is that I was just hearing to what was said also, that EVs and shared and EVs and mobility. Now, to my understanding, and from the Niti Aayog's perspective also, probably these are two different things. Now, electric vehicles are certainly, that is, I mean, I used to say it's a writing on the wall and it is going to be there. So electrification or the shift from the gasoline to the cleaner sources of energy is going to take place, whether we accept it, whether we follow it, whether we adopt it. Otherwise, the Kodak story would be, could be there. So that is one issue. Now, what is the shared and the transformative mobility? Shared is something which probably we have to go a little deeper into it. Shared is not only, I'm saying that it is, but it is not only fleet operators. It's not only taxi operations. Shared is sharing the asset. Shared is sharing the infrastructure. What is sharing? So shared, the definition a few months back, I floated this thing on my social this thing. I got a lot of reactions, about 100, 150 odd reactions on the shared, as to what the shared mobility could be. And what is transformative? Now, the transformative is that when you broaden a road, then you should reach quicker. I mean, I don't find any advantage of broadening all that road and making it signal-free from Dhaula Kuan or from Chanakyapuri to this place. Again, the same thing, 90 minutes. I never want, I mean, after this broadening of the road and all, I used to cover it in 30, 40 minutes. But again, today it has taken more than 90 minutes for me. So this is what the transformative mobility, we have to realize that the mobility which was developed in the country through the ages and in the recent history for colonial exploitations, for the colonial exploits. Now that mobility has to switch over to the economic balanced regional economic growth and for the people, and that probably would be or should be the wish list of the government. So with that perspective, I'm really very happy also that a lot of my colleagues from the industry, a lot of my friends who are in the startups are realizing it. What has been talked about is the less than 5 kilometers of the trip length, which is the average trip length in India. More than 60% of the movement is non-motorized transport in India. These are the statistics which we gave in our report in 2017. So these are the realities. Now, how to pick up the demand, friends? And this is just to answer that. The demand in the country, when we talk about the demand, when we talk about the mobility, when we talk about the electric vehicles, we forget to consider India is different. We have 20 vehicles. I mean, every forum I do repeat it, that we have 20 vehicles per 1,000 population, whereas in US it is 900 plus. So China, more than 150. Europe, around 500. So India is different, and that's why in FAME, you find that we have put emphasis on two-wheelers, three-wheelers, public transport, and then creating the infrastructure for the electric vehicles, which is the charging infrastructure. And to Niti Aayog's understanding, even that is also not really required. It will pick up automatically. The thing is that we have to leave it to the consumer, leave it to the market forces to work on it. So this is very clear, very clearly reflected from our policies. Now, when we consider that India is different, then we have to look at the demand and look at that how do we tap it. Whatever studies are being done, people talk about, whenever we talk of the EVs, whenever we talk about the adoption of EVs, we talk about the four-wheeler passenger vehicles. But we make more than 80% of two-wheelers, three-wheelers. So that's what is the reality, where that's why the India is different. Now, friends, we must think of the solution. The masses, the youngsters, the millennials, the people are looking forward to the solutions. They do not want the vehicle, they do not want the car, they do not want a scooter. They just want a solution from point A to B and how best to provide that solution. So that is where probably who looks at it, he will be, or the person or the industry or the stakeholder, that stakeholder would succeed in this race, which has kind of begun to my understanding. So demand has to be looked at it from an overall perspective of providing the solution to a person who wants to move, and then we have to look at it how best to make use of this opportunity, which is going to be there. Thankfully, we have been able to put mobility or the movement of freight, logistics, goods movement, passenger movement at the center stage, which was not considered in this in India, but now it is at the center stage, and along with the other sectors, this is also being realized by the government and none other than the top leadership, including the Prime Minister of the country.
Thank you, sir. So I've just been given a signal that I should also engage the audience and get questions from the audience. But before we do that, I think one question which really I would like to open to the panel, whoever wants to take it. And I think that's the question of financing the purchase, whether you are a consumer or even innovative models like battery swapping or battery on lease, where the customer just pays for the amount of usage they have, or energy on service, as you mentioned. So there are various ways of really solving this puzzle of the delta cost when you buy an electric vehicle. So maybe Naveen, since you touched upon it, you want to start off with your views, and then anyone else who would like to comment on it. Yeah, before we go to the floor. Yeah.
So battery financing or vehicle financing is one solution that that the consumer is looking for. End of the day, the consumer does realize, Indian consumer is extremely astute. So Indian consumer does calculate his total cost of ownership over the life of the vehicle. So he's not looking at only what is my installment for that month or for that year. He looks at, what is it going to cost me through the lifetime? And is that less or is that equivalent to how much I would have paid otherwise, whether upfront cost or otherwise? So if that difference is substantial, if the premium that he's paying or the installment that he's paying is substantially higher than what he would pay for upfront, he doesn't switch there. So what's happening right now is the financial institutions, there's a lot of these models and jugglery being done, but it's not really working in a very large manner simply because the consumer is going for a product which is at a lower end of the day, is a lower priced product, is equivalent. If you look at IC engine, majority of the vehicles sold are sub 70,000 rupees. And it's taken them 50 years to get here. So in electric, what makes anybody think that suddenly, a lakh and a half or 1,70,000 product is going to become the mass? It's not. The belly of the market is again in the same band as what IC engine 100, 125 cc vehicles are. And that's sub 75, sub 90,000. That's a segment that we are targeting as well. So the minute you go out of that, it comes into a niche market. There is certainly a market for it. I mean, there is a market for high-end cars as well. But is that the mass? India, the average car price is quite low, is sub 5 lakh rupees. So that is one of the problems that rise. Because the battery price, as it's coming down, the price will come down, the consumer adoption will increase. The minute you take batteries out of the equation and you make it into a swappable model, where you can't charge it at home, but you have to swap, then there's only one model which is successful globally, and that's in Taiwan, Gogoro. There is no other successful model for battery swapping anywhere for a consumer. So you've got to either have a very, very dense swapping solution, or this is going to work more for the commercial market. So deliveries, when we're talking about 100 kilometers, now if you give a consumer 100 kilometer plus range on a vehicle, the price goes up. So you've got to take the battery out of the equation and keep on swapping the battery in order for the vehicle to keep running. The second thing is that the more batteries you're putting onto the vehicle, the more charging time, the more every replacement cost goes substantially higher when you come down to the replacing of the batteries after 3 years or 4 years or 5 years, whatever be the case. So swapping works very well for three-wheelers and will work there. Cars, it's not going to work right now, and multiple models have been tried and it's not worked. So it works for fleet sales, whether it's a common platform and it's a uniform chassis, uniform vehicle where the batteries can be swapped. If you take the battery out of the equation and you say, I'm going to finance only the batteries and not the vehicle, we have our legal issues in India that can you actually seize the vehicle or can you stop the vehicle, stall the vehicle electronically or otherwise if you haven't paid your installment for the battery, for example. So there are numerous regulatory issues. There are numerous financial implications that exist right now, which we have to get around. Even policy changes are required at this point of time in order for all of these models to work. But like I said, battery financing or swapping is one part of the solution. It's not the end all.
Sure. Any of you would like to comment?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of points that I would want to mention here is on the financing. Obviously, it has to be either done by the vehicle manufacturer, or as Mr. Munjal was saying, it can also be looked at from the battery, battery supplier to say. Today, one of the biggest challenge any financial institution has with regards to battery or financing is the life expectancy of the battery and the warranty, right? Today, it's a new commodity in the market, and the financial institutions are kind of wary about whether I should be financing this or not. What's the risk associated with this? So I think as more batteries are in the field, the financial institutions are going to get a little bit more comfort level that the risk associated with battery warranty is limited. So one of the things from our perspective and from our company, what we are looking at doing is, since we are bringing in the battery or we are launching our batteries, to look at how we can provide the financing support for the batteries as we bring into the market, because we ourselves as the product manufacturer are warranting the battery. So I think that's one of the things that we are looking at as a solution for the various vehicle manufacturers.
Sure. Akash?
Yeah. So we actually are a business model which has to be asset light. We cannot grow. I have to deploy over the next 3 years 100,000 electric scooters. Now I cannot buy those. That was the problem that we started with, and then we went to a few OEMs, and then they said no, we just want to sell the scooters. We are into the selling business. Now we found an interesting solution. We said that we have a bunch of users on our platform. Why don't we ask users to own one scooter, buy it from us, and then we lease it out to them with a fixed interest. We just did it as a pilot. This was in February this year only, and we got crazy demand. You won't believe. I mean, a lot of people who were not aware. We just put it on a few LinkedIn posts and Facebook posts. For a lot of people who started buying scooters in bunches of 10, 5, 1, 3, this is their demand. And all they needed to do, we gave them the confidence. We gave them the confidence that the scooter will run. We will pay you. We signed a legal contract with them. And this is how, about 40% of my fleet is based on crowd, sourced fleet. And then we took that study, we took it to a few OEMs. We said that, see, people have confidence. We have confidence I can buy those scooters today, but I don't want to because my business model doesn't, work on that. And then a couple of OEMs also came forward. They said, okay, let's look at your numbers, let's look at your financials. We had we were pretty confident on this. And then now there are 2-3 OEMs who've already started working with us on the same model, that either they are financing those, or we are also able to find some dealers, HNIs, NBFCs who are, looking forward to get such models. Because I think the ownership model again comes into the corporates also, that who will fund the capex. And in fact, we are working on this product. How can we massify that?
Okay, so great. I think that's a pretty out of the box idea, crowdsourcing the solution. So over to you, sir, and Ayush later. Would you like to comment on the financing piece and how do you see this evolve?
We are taking it up very strongly with the finance ministry, and so I'm very sure that the financing of all kind of electric vehicles should be there. You understand, in Indian system, the age-old systems of the RTO office, and then when you tell that a vehicle is to be registered without any fee, or a permit is not needed for an electric commercial vehicle, these are something which probably an RTO office is not able to think, assume, or imagine. So things which are happening are out of the imagination. So that's probably the teething trouble, and we Indians are traditionally very conservative and follow the line. So now that the disruption is taking place, so these are the changes which are to take place, and we are finding it, yeah, it is difficult to have all those things, and that too with the kind of diversity in Maharashtra, and somebody is doing something, and then in Karnataka we find that they are not registering three-wheelers, and then something else is happening in West Bengal. So all these things are being taken up. We are in contact with the state government and then with various ministries and the department. But I'm sure that these are the teething things, teething troubles. It will sort it out in due course of time. We just want mobility. We just want people to move point A to B in the shortest and the least possible time with the least impression on our atmosphere and the pollution considerations and least import bills.
I'd like to make a small point on retail finance as far as two-wheelers or any electric vehicle is concerned. What we have seen, we have already discussed about the challenges, we have already discussed about the price point, the delta which is there because of the battery pack and battery electric vehicles. So what we are seeing in today's scenarios, NBFCs and PSUs are not very eager to fund electric vehicles. That is the major problem. And if few of them down the line local financiers are funding, they are charging a very high interest cost while funding the vehicle. So these two are the major challenges which need to be addressed, and we definitely need support from the government on that front to make electric vehicle financing as maybe a prime lending sector or something, so that banks and NBFCs can come forward. We have seen areas in three-wheeler specifically where NBFCs and local financiers are charging as high as 40% IRR. And even then they have a lot of constraints and challenges while funding the vehicles. And this comes up because of many multiple assumptions which they do about the life cycle of the vehicle, the life cycle of the battery pack, which need to be addressed. Yes, we are finding across the board, across the industry, we are finding solutions, ways and means how to do that. But they are all temporary. It will not give us long-term solution. A vehicle funding can only be sorted out by funding through the NBFCs or the financial institutions. Till the time we don't, get support from them, because that is the core on which every industry works on. If we don't get the funding from them directly for electric vehicles, we will see the demand challenges and growth prospects for the EV industry.
Thank you. So maybe we have time for a couple of questions from the floor. So I would like to open it up. Anybody who has a question, can we have some mics here so that, please quickly, identify yourself, where you're from, and then go ahead with your question, please.
I'm Priyank Agarwal from Exicom. I have two questions. I hope I don't use up all of the time. One is on the demand side, any point of view on urban versus rural? Because we see a lot of two-wheeler demand today goes into the rural market as well. So when we shift to electric, do we see the rural market leading or lagging urban? And on the supply side, we haven't talked about it, but if we look at even Anilji, we've talked of targets like 25%, 50% adoption. That is like 7 to 10 million vehicles a year. So from the supply side, how do you see the industry preparing itself for that kind of mass adoption? Thank you.
Ayush, you want to take that?
So as far as the supply side is concerned, frankly speaking, we have seen a lot of things which are actually happening on floor. And I'll definitely, will be happy to share that the government initiative to make in India has channelized the complete process and expedited it. So I can see very clearly from last 10 years, the kind of traction I have seen in the key component manufacturing in India has taken some pace, especially from the motor perspective, the controller perspective. And as we see that this is going to take furthermore actions, the supply side for the key components will definitely going to improve and increase with a lot of big companies coming into the core sector. The only area of challenge still has been the battery cell manufacturing. We have not seen a lot of traction on that area, which is again a key driver for electric vehicle. As we all know, 40 to 50% of the cost come from battery cell, and that is still not, we are seeing actively on floors any manufacturers coming on for battery cells. I have been, talking about it, that there should be some kind of big government initiatives which can be taken on floor so that we can have, and the vehicle which are running on battery cells should come up very soon. Then only we can expedite the growth of electric vehicles. Apart from that, I think the key factors, we have been already, India is a global hub for manufacturing, and a lot of the components, most of the components, what we see in IC engine are very much common to that of electric vehicle, especially the suspension, tires, all major components. And the key components we are definitely seeing are starting up with the process of backward integration, supply chain is getting in place. We are seeing that traction. The only gray area which I feel is still is the battery cells manufacturing.
And how about the rural and urban?
Frankly speaking, even if you see from last few years, we have not seen major difference as far as urban and rural is concerned, because even in rural area, we have seen good potential for electric vehicles coming in, because the range anxiety, which is the major questions which come us with a consumer perspective, are not there, because there the people don't need to commute 80 kilometers or 100 kilometers. They are commuting on an average of 40 to 50 kilometers, which is very much in range for the cost optimization is concerned and the product mobility. The only challenge we face, what we would have faced is the availability of electricity, which definitely is improving. And we see that these challenges will be addressed if retail finance and easy availability of finance will be there. We can see that the traction for the rural area also. You see the three-wheelers, especially I can tell you, you can see in every hook and corner of city of UP, you go, which is highly densely populated, but you can see rickshaws everywhere, electric rickshaws for the mobility. So I don't see that the adoption for electric vehicle is easy in urban or tough in rural. It will definitely be is balanced, and I see not much challenge to address that area as far as the rural and urban is concerned.
Mr. Srivastava, you wanted to say something on this?
We are handling all the issues related with the supply side. The only thing is that the battery manufacturing, there are discussions and considerations that how to come out with something which incentivizes the battery manufacturing to the tune of a few, if not 100, then maybe a few tenths of gigawatt hour of the battery manufacturing. So that is from the supply side. For the component manufacturers, we had extensive discussions how to convert the internal combustion ACMA people to the electric manufacturing. We have analyzed the components which need to be transformed, how it could be transformed, and how many components which will become redundant. But yes, of course, in any case, we are growing at a very fast pace, and internal combustion is not going to die. It is going to continue for the next 20, 25 years, if not more. So that is probably is not the major consideration. So this is from the supply side. The demand side, globally, the subsidy regimes have been withdrawn, whether it is China or Scandinavian countries. China is going to withdraw the demand side incentives from 2020 and now putting focus on emission-based incentives. So this is what is happening globally, and we think that the taxation structure, the duty regimes should be dynamic to make or to facilitate the direction in which industry or the stakeholders should be moving for in the interest of the country and in the desired direction where it should be moving. So this is broadly for the supply and demand side handling of the whole thing. I hope I have tried to clarify the things.
Thank you. I think we have time for one last question.
Sorry. I have a slightly contrarian view to this, because what Ayush was talking about more was the three-wheeler industry, which is now pretty well entrenched. So that whole ecosystem for three-wheelers has got established across the country. The same is not the case for two-wheelers still. Now, what's happening is a chicken and egg situation. So a lot of the automotive component manufacturers are waiting for the volumes to grow up before they actually make heavy investments into it. Now, the volumes are not going to increase if they don't make the investments into it. And localization, actually, though we are working totally on Make in India, but the fact is that it increases the price by about 20 to 25, 30%, simply because the volumes are so low. So when we look at it, initially when we started looking at it, we looked at that, okay, where's the ecosystem for supply chain? Is that 20 kilometers from you, or is that 2,000 kilometers from you, or is that 5,000 kilometers from you? And India, at that point of time, even now, the supply chain is it's not robust at all. Will come, but so far it's not there. That's one part of it. Second is when we look at policies, the policy is putting the cart, in a way, it's putting the cart before the horse. Simply because it's saying that we want localization without the demand creation. So demand creation happens, localization will have to happen automatically. And it has to be a phase-wise manner. So batteries can come later, but what about the plastics, for example? Now, plastics makes no sense to localize unless you've got a very large volume, simply because the molds are so expensive and you require so many shots in order to actually justify the cost of putting the molds. So there is a number of changes which have to be done in order for this to make sense across the whole ecosystem. Now, what Anil was talking about is the demand, the incentives going away in China. But what's already happened in China is it's a well-established ecosystem. India, we are still nascent, so we still need the governmental support. We still need the policy. We still need milestones to say that, if the government is saying that, we have Bharat 6 coming in, for example, in 2020 April, then they have to say that, okay, we want to be zero emission by so and so time in order for everybody to head in that direction. So it's very important, one, for us to have direction. We will figure out how to get there. But the direction has to be there to say that this is the end goal. Now, how do we get to that goal? Industry will figure out. And in the meantime, that hand-holding, that support is required to get it to a certain volume, and then that can be taken away. Because then the momentum would carry on its own.
Okay. Thank you. I think one last question. I saw a hand up there at the back. Can we have the microphone there?
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
My name is Nishant, and I have a startup called Boson Motors. I have been in the EV industry for last 10 years. I have been actually building electric race vehicles for the track. And the difference I have seen is when you have two identical machines with the same battery pack, with the same hardware configuration, but they can give you a different range even on the racetrack or even on the road. The difference will go when it comes to motors and controls. If you look at all the discussion over here or in any other panels, it mostly goes into batteries, smart mobility, shared, SaaS, IoT. But what about motors and controls? Because they can actually increase up to 15 to 20% of the range with the same battery pack used by the same other manufacturer. The thing is, when it comes to motors and controllers in the Indian market right now, it is flooded with the cheap Chinese products, which are substandard. And there actually has to be anti-dumping duty in terms of those products because they are not efficient, they are cheaper, I totally agree, but they are actually not giving a value to the customer when it comes to range or quality. So how would either Niti Aayog or anyone of the panel would cater this kind of scenario? Because the investment in motor and control technology is not there in India. So it's like you're not investing into the engines, you're investing into the fuel. So fuel might change in another, say, 3 or 4 years or 5 years. There might be a different technology apart from lithium, or you might totally turn into fuel cell vehicles. But the motor and control technology will always be there because 60% of the world's power that is generated or used is by electric motors.
This is not correct to say that there is no investment in the motor and controller. There are outfits which are working, and totally in the industrial sector, in the private sector, they are working for the motor and controllers, as you have rightly said, and we do realize it, but yeah, it has to be a decision which is to be there at the finance ministry or at those levels. So I do realize it that Even in the batteries also, this has been said that the kind of batteries which are coming to the country. So a whole lot of things. And I said that the duty regime and the taxation regimes have to be dynamic to take care of the ecosystem which is evolving.
I agree with Anilji on this. There is substantial investments which are already going on. In fact, we are working with a number of companies for the past couple of years on improving the motors and manufacturing them in India. In a way, what you're saying is correct, but it's not the complete picture. See, end of the day, the consumer will buy a best product which suits him. It's not about that if it's a poor quality, the consumer will just not buy it. So they will buy, they are looking for an efficient and what is working in the market at this point of time. So Chinese, even if we manufacture the motors in India, for example, the rare earth magnets have to come from there because we don't have the supply of that. And there the volumes are so large that it makes commercial sense to buy it from there. But localization is already happening, it's underway, it's absolutely happening. But like I said, the costs will go up.
So actually, if you see the question which you were asking was, that motor and controller is not sync with the battery pack. You are not getting the same response,
Exactly.
right?
You don't have the same response.
So to answer that, let me tell you a basic information and let me share you with this. As far as individually the motor is concerned and the controller is concerned, why the battery pack is not giving you the same performance when it is integrated with the motor and controller is the problem with the integration, not about motor or controller individually. If you see overall perspective, a motor in a worst case scenario, a bad quality motor will give you anywhere between 80 to 85% of efficiency, even in the worst case scenario. And with the controller, the worst case scenario again is not less than 90%. So individually, if you see motor controller, it will give you anywhere between 85 to 90% of the efficiency when they are working together. The problem what you face or what you are pointing out is the integration problem between the motor controller and the battery pack, which most of the people don't do. So here need to be an integration from the OEM side where the people are just what I mentioned, like night by flies, they don't know about the technology and they just jump into the business. And then the problem of the quality and the integration comes and they completely go haywire. As far as the motor and controller, as far as the evolving technology is concerned, you will see the best performing motor will only give you anywhere efficiency between 92% to 95%. That is the best possible scenario across the globe is concerned. Some companies will talk about anything above 95%, but few of them. And when we talk about a controller, you will not get anything above 95% if you see. So when we're talking about the improving the technology, there is very less to do as far as the motor is concerned. Electronics is already working in the best possible scenarios because there is only very few efficient, energy loss in between the complete process when electronics is compared. So it is majorly what you are facing a challenge is majorly the challenge of integration between motor, controller and the battery pack. Because in a battery pack, you have BMSs which are available. If it is not integrated well with the controller, you will definitely going to face those issues.
I actually won't agree on there is no improvement on the motors because our motors are almost 3 times lighter and smaller than the Tesla motors. So for me, I know that if the motor is lighter, if the control is smaller, you have much more space for the battery packs. So it can actually increase the vehicle area by 30%. So the integration is the biggest problem. That's for sure.
Sure. I think you can continue the conversation offline now with Ayush. We are running short on time. So I think just to quickly summarize, we all know what are some of the challenges. I think one of the highlights that came out of this conversation was what could be the innovative means of structuring the purchase either through financial engineering or through swappable batteries. He talked about crowdsourcing of financing, at least in the commercial application as one of the ways forward. So very clearly, nobody knows what is the perfect way. And in all likelihood, as the market evolves, it will be chaotic and it will be, 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards. But I think it will require a lot of experiments, in a controlled environment. And from there, we will know the path forward as we found in the 3-wheeler segment. I really believe that in the next 5 years, we are going to see a lot more electric two-wheelers on the streets of our country. So with that, thank you very much to all the panelists. I think we had some really interesting, engaging discussion. And thank you very much for being a wonderful audience. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That was indeed a thought-provoking session.